Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. We are going to get kicked off and started here. We have a lot to get to. So good afternoon. Thank you so much for tuning in for our virtual real estate forum event, the third installment of our mega development series discussing the future of Lincoln Yards. On behalf of the Executives Club, I am excited to welcome you all here and kick things off by thanking the sponsor of our real estate forum, JLL, for their support of this programming. And I also have the pleasure of introducing today's speakers. Our moderator for today is Dan Ryan, Central Region Market Director at JLL and Board Director at the Executives Club of Chicago. Dan has overall responsibility for JLL's team and services across the central US, including brokerage, property management, project and development services, and valuations. On these responsibilities, he's also an executive sponsor of JLL America's D&I Council and chairs the US Market Director Executive Committee. Speaking with Dan today is Andy Glore, CEO of Sterling Bay, and Dr. Suzette McKinney, Principal and Director of Life Sciences at Sterling Bay. Andy joined Sterling Bay in 2002 and directed its growth into a fully integrated owner-operated real estate investment and development company. Andy's a pioneer of the urban model of innovation districts in Chicago, and recent high-profile projects completed by Sterling Bay under his leadership include corporate headquarters for McDonald's, Google, Dyson, Glassdoor, and GoGo. Active member of Chicago's civic community, Andy is involved with Misericordia and serves on the board of CARA, a local nonprofit that helps break the cycle of homelessness. And Dr. McKinney is a public health expert, thought leader, and nationally recognized expert in emergency preparedness and response. At Sterling Bay, she oversees relationships with industry leaders involved in the life sciences ecosystem. She also leads the strategy to expand Sterling Bay's footprint in life sciences nationwide. She previously served as CEO and Executive Director of the Illinois Medical District and is on the Board of Directors for Lurie Children's Hospital, Susan G. Komen Chicago, and the Fifth Third Advisory Board. So thank you so much to all of our speakers for taking the time to join us today. And we have a lot to get to in the next hour, so I will turn things over to Dan.
Thank you, Megan. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our real estate forum event today. We have been very fortunate over the past year to continue to offer some great real estate programming through Executives Club. And just to recap, we kicked off our programming in the first quarter of last year with a great session. It was called the State of Real Estate Development. It featured Maurice Cox, Chicago's Commissioner of Planning and Development. We then launched our Mega Developments series, and we started with the future of the Michael Reese site and hosted Scott Goodman from Farpoint and Jim Reynolds from Loop Capital. Our second in that series highlighted One Central with Robert Dunn from Landmark Development. And today is our third and final installment of our Mega Development series. And I am really excited to welcome Andy Glore and Suzette McKinney today from Sterling Bay for a conversation about Lincoln Yards, a new mixed-use community that will be developed on 55 plus acres along the North Branch of the Chicago River. We're going to begin today with a short video and presentation about Lincoln Yards, followed by moderated discussion that I'll lead with Andy and Suzette, and we will have time for your questions. So we encourage you to send those questions into our host. You can do that via the chat icon at the bottom of your screen. Also, feel free to keep your video on during the event. If you'd like a more focused view on your screen, you can put your Zoom in speaker mode, which is located at the top right-hand corner of your screen. So before watching the video, I'm going to kick us off with some level setting on the current economy and the office real estate trends that we're seeing in Chicago. So Megan, if you can put up the first slide, that would be great. Great, thank you. So economically, the first quarter was off to a good start after, as expected, the global economy experienced its worst calendar year performance in 40 years, contracting by an estimated 3.6%. The U.S. economy is now poised for its best growth in more than 35 years. And reopening economies should unleash pent-up demand, both at the consumer level as well as the commercial level. And the U.S. is really driving the early global growth. through financial stimulus and the vaccination efforts. Clearly, there are downside risks that remain. A couple of examples include any kind of significant interruption in the vaccine rollout in the U.S. would be concerning, as well as inflation that may lead to higher bond yields. But overall, the U.S. commercial real estate market is very well positioned. Next slide, please, Megan. Some key things, and this is just from an office perspective in the Chicago CBD that we're seeing, indicate that a clear recovery is underway. We track active tenants in the market in Chicago, and those have increased threefold so far this year. Public transit ridership has doubled in the first quarter. And for those of you that drive like I do, you know that traffic is up quite a bit. My commute is much longer than it was about 60 days ago. Office vacancy rates are fairly stable in Chicago, increasing only about 0.5% in Q1, with the sublease additions beginning to slow, which is a positive side for the market. And office face rental rates have held fairly steady. Asking rates are only down about 2.4% year over year. So overall, some encouraging signs that we're beginning to see in the global economy, the U.S. economy, and in the Chicago office real estate market. So with that as an introduction and backdrop, Megan, I'm going to give it back to you to cue the video on Lincoln Yards.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Everyone give us just one moment here and we'll get this video queued up for you.
Lincoln Yards is a vibrant, new, mixed-use community that weaves together two of Chicago's most iconic neighborhoods, Lincoln Park and Bucktown. Perfectly positioned as Chicago's next-gen hub for business, entertainment, culture, and recreation, Lincoln Yards will transform a former industrial corridor into an active destination, serving the city of Chicago and all its residents as an important economic driver and community resource. When complete, Lincoln Yards will deliver 21 acres of open space, a historic amount of affordable housing, create 23,000 plus permanent on-site jobs, as well as 10,000 plus full-time equivalent construction jobs with significant minority and women-owned business participation, generating $4.3 billion in economic output for the city of Chicago. Creating a commuter experience unlike any other, Lincoln Yards features quick access to the Kennedy Expressway, 2 metro lines, multiple CTA train stations, several bus routes, extension of the elevated 606 trail, a new area shuttle service, and an extended system of water taxis utilizing the development's most striking natural amenity, the Chicago River. The shared vision of Lincoln Yards has been created by a collection of global experts who are the best in their respective fields. Sterling Bay is Chicago's premier developer with an expansive portfolio nationwide, known for creating world-class urban campuses for some of the nation's leading companies. Having partnered with the largest, most well-known hospitality brands in the country, our team delivers the highest quality entertainment experiences across the city. At Sterling Bay, we believe in developing both properties and relationships, and in doing so, we transform spaces, businesses, and communities.
All right, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate it. I want to thank Dan and Megan for pulling this together and give us the opportunity to talk about Lincoln Yards. Suzanne and I are very excited about it. The majority of the presentation is going to talk about Lincoln Yards, but before we get going, for those of you who don't know us, we thought we'd have a kind of a numerical summary of kind of who we are today. You mind hitting the next slide? So I think the number that jumps out on this page is really the pipeline. And one of the reasons that Suzette is here, that if we have about $10 billion of development, both in Chicago and around the country, that we're excited about. And if you look at the $10 billion, it's made up of life science, office, multifamily, and industrial. So we have, we're going to be busy for some years to come. Next slide. Our core expertise and our history has been in creating creative office environments. And that's something that we've done for McDonald's and Google and WPP and many others. And so we realized that the office space could be a competitive tool for companies to use to recruit the best in the business and retain the best in the business. And that trend has only continued. So, a good example that we all refer to is when McDonald's went from Oak Brook to downtown as new headquarters, the resumes they got for openings went up 20x. And so kind of where you work in terms of the environment, the neighborhood, and the space you have is really important to the success of your company. And that's something we've been doing for a while. This is something that I know some people know about PMDs. I'm sorry, next slide. I apologize. So, PMDs, well, there we go. So PMDs were created in 1988 by Mayor Daley to keep industrial jobs in the city. And it made a ton of sense at that time. And I think over the last 40 years, some areas have gentrified to the point where it no longer makes sense to have heavy industrial in some of these neighborhoods. And I think if you look at the PMD in Fulton Market, that was a PMD until Google came in there and it changed, and it's been enormously impactful to the economy of Chicago. And obviously an area that we've been heavily involved in. And I think if you look at Lincoln Yards, Lincoln Yards is only 7% of over 760 acres of the North Branch corridor. So when people ask how Chicago is going to get out of this pandemic, I think it's growth, and I think it's taking these underutilized industrial areas and converting it to a new age economy.
And to that point, Andy, while Lincoln Yards is only 7% of the entire PMD, the annual economic output that Lincoln Yards will produce is over $41 billion a year. So we think that's a significant economic advantage for Chicago.
Yeah, and I think that, the recent efforts as it relates to cannabis and casino are very, very important, but I think the way to really get out of it is growth. And that's something that we're focused on. Next slide, please. These deals are not for the faint of heart. They're very, very difficult. And so in order to pull something like this off, you need the best and brightest in all aspects of the job. So from our capital partners in JP Morgan and Lone Star, to the master planners, to the architect, to the landscape architect, every inch of this property has been thought through, has been challenged and re-challenged. And we're really happy with, transitioning from drawings to actually going vertical. But it took a team, and these are a lot of our players and many, many others. Next slide.
And so Dan started us out by talking about just the economics here in the city. And I think what we'd like to point out and really focus on is the once in a lifetime opportunity that we are building with Lincoln Yards in terms of job creation. Lincoln Yards is set to produce over 23,000 permanent jobs with an average salary of $82,000. And that's significant when you look at the number of people currently living in our city who are either underemployed or unemployed. So we're very excited about that.
Yeah, and I also think Lincoln Yards, as well as other parts of other large pieces of property, it gives the chance for companies to create an urban campus, not just one-off buildings, but take several buildings and get all the benefits of a campus, but put it in an urban setting where it's easier for them to recruit. And I think Lincoln Yards does just that.
Absolutely.
Next slide. We studied master plans from all over the world, and there's just a few common themes. And the most important theme is open space. And so, the core of our development, there could be 21 acres of public open space, as you can see here. So that's almost 40% of the overall development. And so you have the open space combined with the river, which forms our core. I think we were really focused on making sure that we call it porosity. So there's 20 different ways to get in and out of the site. So ultimately, this site is going to blend in with the neighborhood, which is really, really important. And I also think the authenticity. I mean, the urban planning in terms of having wide sidewalks and cobblestone streets, spacing of the buildings, how the podium looks. So we took extra care to make sure that the end product is not going to feel contrived. It's going to feel very authentic. Next slide. Somewhat redundant here, but as I said, 40% of the overall deal is open. It's critical. It is not just recreational fields, and it's not just, it's a combination of both of those things, because as someone who lives in the city, there's never enough open space. And so taking this much land and creating an environment where people can hang out in or play games in is super, super important. And at the end of the day, it's going to be over 21 acres.
Next slide. So this one's a little redundant as well. So why don't we go to the next slide and get into the infrastructure?
Sure. So affordable units, first off, if you look at the last 13 years in the city of Chicago, there's only been 1,000 affordable units have been built. So Lincoln Yards, when complete, will literally double the amount of affordable housing units in Chicago. There obviously is a need for far more, but that is a very important step in terms of addressing that need. The open space, the Riverwalk, the extension of the 606, these are all public benefits that are essentially tying two different neighborhoods together that have been separated by this industrial corridor. So I think this will be a good template for other areas of the 760 acres going forward.
Next slide. All right, and so, nope, go back one more. There we are, thank you. So we are also, something's happening.
Yeah, you mind going, there we go.
There we go. So this is a rendering of the new metro station that will serve both the Union Pacific and the Northwest lines. We think that the development of this new metro station will also give Lincoln Yards a competitive advantage because all of our pharmaceutical and biotech partners that currently reside on the North Shore will have the ability to take a metro right into the city and come and see us at Lincoln Yards and bring some of their talent down to Lincoln Yards as well.
I also think if, the train station is going to be connected with the 606. So if you're living 3 miles west of Lincoln Yards, you literally can get on a bike. You can get here. You don't have to cross a street or a light. You're getting on the train. You literally go from train, and the 606 will take you to all parts of Lincoln Yards. In addition to that, we have a water taxi that ends at the river here. So you can get there on a train. You have the 606. You have the water taxi. It's going to be a very convenient place to get to, no matter where you're coming from in the city. Next slide. We literally have to build a city within a city. And so if the area you're looking at here is about 15 acres of the overall 53 acres. And within that, you have our first life science building, which are going to break ground in July. You have 800 apartments. You have approximately a 350,000 square foot office building. You have residential units along the river. And most importantly, you have a huge open park space. So this is all part of phase one. It's approximately $1 billion of vertical. And assuming we get the permit, we're hopeful to start in the middle of July, which we're super excited about. Next slide.
So this is just a photo that shows our rendering of the curated dining and retail that we plan to incorporate into Lincoln Yards. Andy mentioned earlier some of the cobblestone streets, just another feature that we're planning to do to bring some character and unique aspects to the development.
And we also, in the post-pandemic world, we made sure that the roofs were, roll cover roofs that opened up, that the doors were nano walls, that fresh air could get anywhere. We're putting radiant heat everywhere to make it a 3-season dining situation. God forbid we end up in another situation that we're just in. So we tried to make some changes to address some of the new health concerns that came out of last year. Next slide. Another perspective, this is a live, work, play environment. People who live here, we want to make sure that everything you need is within this 53 acres. If you work here, you're going to have all the amenities you want right here, easy to get to, as we mentioned, with the train, with the river taxis, biking, etc. So it's really a city within a city, and we're excited to start the first $1 billion of development in July.
All right. Next slide.
Next slide.
And we believe that Chicago will be the next large life sciences market in the United States. Our goal with Lincoln Yards is to make Chicago the third coast. And we know that Chicago already boasts the most diversified economy among the largest US metropolitan areas. And with the rich and cultural and recreational amenities that we have here in Chicago, our goal is to add to that and enrich that and make Chicago the place where our nation's top tier talent want to come.
Exactly. And I would just say that if you just compare Chicago compared to other markets, and if we pick the top 3 ones, Cambridge and San Diego and the Bay Area, they have between 20 and 30 million square feet of new lab space. Chicago has under 1.5 million feet. So there's a lot of catching up to do. There's a lot of wood to chop. And I think life science is not just going to be in Lincoln Yards, but it's going to be all over the city. But it's important for the city of Chicago to catch up. It's an important part of our recovery.
Absolutely. Next slide. And so to that end, again, we believe that Lincoln Yards is the first of its kind in Chicago, but we really see the new community that Lincoln Yards will create as a place where innovation and opportunity meet. We want to create natural synergies between emerging companies and mature companies and institutions. And the goal is really to ensure that we create a robust concentration of research institutions, mature companies, startups, scale-ups, and even incubators and accelerators. This will be a place where investors want to be, entrepreneurs want to be, and workers want to be because of the vibrant landscape that we're creating.
And we're trying to create an ecosystem that if you're a startup business coming out of Northwestern to a fully mature business that needs 50,000 feet, and this is something that's been done in Cambridge as well as out in the Bay Area, that we have a spot for you. So once you get into the program, it's just a question of where you're going to go depending on how big you are. And that's an important thing for the economy and obviously for Lincoln Yards as well.
Next slide.
Sometimes people think labs are just labs, but they're 50% office. And so all the things that make all the amenities that are important for office workers are also important for labs. And so having the shops and the amenities and the public space and the hotel rooms is all part of this successful ecosystem that you need to grow these companies successfully in Chicago. And all that's going to be in Lincoln Yards.
Right. Next slide. And so I think we've already talked about me joining the Sterling Bay team as Director of Life Sciences. Dr. James Gillespie operates the PRISM Institute, which is Sterling Bay's new life sciences technology incubator and accelerator. But I think the most important thing that I want to point out here is that we currently have 3 existing life sciences developments, but we have 3 life sciences conversions that are also underway in San Diego, California. We have expanded our goal here at Sterling Bay for the life sciences. And while, yes, we are focused on building Lincoln Yards here in Chicago, we're also looking to expand our work in the life sciences across the country, starting with San Diego.
Yes, and I would say one of the issues historically in Chicago is just connecting to entrepreneurs with capital, which is why we formed PRISM. And so it gives an opportunity for entrepreneurs to work with seasoned veterans in the industry, get seed investment, and hopefully grow into a successful business, which will be obviously good for their company and good for Chicago. And that's the role that PRISM is going to play.
Exactly. Next slide. So this is a map of our national presence, and you can see based on the type of line where our current markets are and where we are expanding in the very near future.
Yeah, so we are, hopefully going to be in 5 markets by the end of the year. As I said, Chicago has catch up to do in terms of the number of quality lab spaces, but the Bay Area and San Diego and Cambridge obviously are target markets, but markets like Dallas and Atlanta are also playing catch up. So we expect that it's going to be a healthy life science market going forward, and that's something we're focused on as well.
Next slide. And I think we talked about most of this already, but this is just a slide that highlights one of the first life sciences developments that we did here in Chicago, our 2430 North Halsted site. And many of you may recall just a couple of weeks ago, we announced that Solved Health will be relocating from Carlsbad, California, here to Chicago. They are going to initially take up space in 2430 with plans to move and expand to Lincoln Yards once it's done.
And we looked at 2430 as a validation deal for the life science market. I mean, at the time that we bought this, it wasn't clear as to whether or not you could fill a building like this, in a non-traditional location with life science companies. And, we expect this building to be 100% leased by the end of the 3rd quarter. So it just shows you how much demand there is for high quality lab space. And as I said, 2430 validated that, and we're going to continue that momentum with G1 and other buildings at Lincoln Yards.
Next slide. So again, just photos of our 3 existing life sciences developments. I won't read the stats on each of these developments. You can see those here. So why don't we go on to the next slide? And this is a rendering of our first life sciences building at Lincoln Yards. What I'd like to point out here, Andy spoke a bit earlier about some of the safety measures that we're putting into Lincoln Yards, considering what we went through with the pandemic. And, you know, you see here balconies on every floor where the office space opens out into balconies. And I would just point out that that's really an unusual feature for life sciences buildings, because it's always so important to maintain certain standards in a laboratory building. But we felt it was very important to be considerate of not just COVID-19, but what we could possibly see in the future. And we want to make sure that any tenant coming to Lincoln Yards feels as though, as a developer, Sterling Bay also takes their health and their safety to light as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. And I think that, you know, whether it's a lab building or office buildings, the buildings we're designing now all have fresh air and balconies on every floor, all have generous staircases to avoid the elevators. There are changes you can make, not to completely solve all the issues with the pandemic, but fresh air is definitely an important one, as Suzette pointed out. And I think also having, as I said, generous stairwells throughout the building. That's something that in all of our buildings going forward, we're gonna have.
Yep. Next slide, please. And so here we just offer some additional photos of what that first building will look like. I don't really have a name for it yet. We're calling it G1.
G1, it's not a great name. I have to work on that.
Yes, but you can see, you know, views of our beautiful Chicago skyline, as well as the overhang and entry of the building. And then in the top right corner, what some of the landscaping will look like.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, an important feature throughout Lincoln Yards is how we embrace the river. And I think that it's long been overlooked. And I think, I think it's, you know, you'll see throughout our whole development that there'll be a lot of interaction between the river. And obviously that's a trend that's happening all around the city. And this is our first step in Lincoln Yards to show that.
Next slide. Again, more views of the building. The first two, the top one and then the bottom left, are of the interior. So we have planned a very large and spacious building lobby with the generous staircase, as Andy mentioned. And then the bottom left, what you see is a snapshot of some of the event and conferencing space that will be available within the facility. And then on the bottom right, that's just a bit more of a close-up view of what the tenant terraces will look like on each floor of this building.
And I think, to Suzette's earlier point, I think you're going to have a mix of academic institutions, large pharma, entrepreneurial startups. It's going to be a good ecosystem within G1, and then the plan is to obviously expand G1 into several of the buildings in Lincoln Yards.
Next slide.
In closing, listen, it's a development that has been long in the making. We're excited to break ground in July. I think it's enormously impactful to the city of Chicago now more than ever to create $4 billion of annual economic output, which is enormous. To my point earlier, I think there's an opportunity for the city to do this. Obviously, increase the size of Lincoln Yards into the other 760 acres, which I think would have an enormous impact on Chicago's recovery. It's going to be a live, work, play environment. You're going to be able to live and work and basically never leave and have all your amenities right there. Super excited to get going. It's been a Herculean effort, and we're super excited about it.
Right. So Dan, we'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Andy and Suzette. Great overview and a lot for us to dig into. So let's get to it. Let's talk a little bit about, you had mentioned, Andy, the post-pandemic world, which everyone is thinking about right now, impact on their business and plans and things like that. But specifically, as you reflect on those challenges in the past year and look forward to a project like Lincoln Yards, what, if anything, has changed in your overall vision for Lincoln Yards? You talked about outdoor spaces, but even, you know, bigger picture than that. What has changed in your overall approach to Lincoln Yards after the pandemic?
I would say the first thing that comes to mind is you take your best guess on what portion is going to be office, what portion is going to be life science and residential. And I would say over the course of 2020 and early 2021, life science is not going to be a sideshow. We fully expect it to be several million feet at Lincoln Yards. It could end up being the majority of our use up there.
Well, that's amazing, and that is something that's very new there. Let's dig into that, and this is a topic, Suzette, I know you're passionate about, as are many that are listening on the call today. But one of the biggest economic development priorities in the city is to attract more life sciences users and research organizations from the industry. And let's take a step back. As you think about Chicago, what are some of the attributes of our city that are attractive to the life sciences industry, and how does that compare to the real mature markets? Andy, you mentioned Cambridge, and certainly there's several places on the West Coast, but what will differentiate us to be able to really bring this plan to life?
Well, Dan, I think the first thing that differentiates us is the large number of world-class universities and hospitals and healthcare systems that we have here in Chicago. Of course, there are world-class institutions in other places, but we seem to have a larger concentration of those world-class institutions here in Chicago. And then I think we also have great diversity of talent. Because what I often say is not only do we have talent coming out of those world-class universities, but we have untapped talent here in the rich neighborhoods in Chicago. Once again, part of the impetus behind the PRISM Institute to try and tap in to some of that talent. But another thing I think that Chicago offers life sciences companies is a lower cost of living for their employees than either of the coasts. And I think, in this post-pandemic world, people's personal economic viability is going to become increasingly important as companies decide where they want to locate and establish a new presence. And then, of course, you can't have this conversation without talking about just the vast and rich cultural and artistic amenities that we have here in Chicago. Everything from our neighborhoods to our theater scene, our music scene, and all of the other cultural and artistic amenities that we have.
And I'll just add to it, it's not exact blueprint to what happened with the .com, but obviously it started in the Bay, it started on the coast, and it expanded everywhere. And I think that you're going to see that same trend, but I think it's going to be accelerated. And I think Chicago is going to be one of the beneficiaries of that.
Yeah, great insight. And just following up on that, it's clear from looking at other successful life sciences cities that clustering is very important. So while these organizations might be competing with one another, they like to be near each other, whether that's research, lab, med tech, whatever the case may be. So having a clustered real estate opportunity, I think could be very attractive. As you think about the different life sciences uses, do you break down research or lab or med tech at all, Suzette?
At this point, our goal is to really grow and advance the life sciences here in Chicago. And so we aren't really looking to break that down. Our plan for attracting tenants is broad. We want to attract as many of the various types of life sciences tenants as we possibly can. And to your point about the importance of clustering, I like to say you never know where the next new idea and breakthrough technology is going to come from. It may come from two people working at two different companies who met in the coffee shop downstairs in that building, And so again, we're looking broad and being really aggressive about that.
And I think, Dan, the hardest thing is to get the momentum moving, which is happening now. And I think that for the city of Chicago, to get that life science momentum, wherever that may be, is really important. And that's something that we're hyper focused on.
Great. Let's talk about sustainability a bit. This is a topic that had been really accelerating pre-pandemic and now I'd say is probably on fire, certainly post-pandemic, and the environmental considerations. As you think about sustainability in the development of Lincoln Yards, how do you incorporate that best into the project, and has that accelerated in your thinking?
It's always been a priority for our buildings in terms of LEED certification. I think it's taken on a greater importance now with the pandemic, what we're trying to do, but obviously it's something that is, it's important for the 53 acres. It's something that's obviously top of mind, not only for us, but for the users And so I don't think it's gotten more, maybe it's gotten more important because of the pandemic, but it's always been a priority.
Right. Got it. And you in your overview talked a little bit about public spaces, which is a follow-on to the sustainability and interest there. But can you tell us a little bit more about the public spaces and how they'll be integrated into the overall plans at Lincoln Yards?
I mean, with 40% of the overall acreage dedicated to open spaces, it's going to take a lot of different forms. And obviously within the building, something that we've been doing a lot of is, rooftop decks and patios and fresh air on every floor. That's easy. I think that, how we space out the buildings will be really important. How we program the open and recreational space will be really important. But, the river is a key driver in terms of kayaking and boating and being able to access that. That is something that, Rahm Emanuel started in terms of Riverwalk downtown. It's only accelerated. We think it's really important. It splits Lincoln Yards in half. So it's a high priority for us. And I think that will play a large role in that as well.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about access to Lincoln Yards, which is a really important factor in any successful development. And there are various connection points available in your plan development, including Metro CTA, the 606. Can you kind of share your thoughts on the importance of access and what your plans are in order to accommodate that?
Go ahead.
Go ahead. We're tripping over each other.
Yeah.
So, I think access is critical. We want institutions that are currently here in Chicago to be able to easily access the site. As I mentioned before, the North Shore has a number of big pharma firms, Fortune 500 companies. We wanted to make it easier for them to access the site. And I think most importantly, when a company that currently doesn't have a presence in Chicago is considering a presence, we wanted Lincoln Yards to be that place where they didn't have to worry about having difficulty getting from the airport to the site and moving around the community. And so the access is one of the most important aspects.
And I will tell you, obviously as a Chicago resident, the proximity to O'Hare, I mean, just from Lincoln Yards to the Loop in the morning rush hour could take 25 minutes. And so some of the companies that we're talking to, that extra 15, 20 minutes closer to O'Hare is extremely important. Being right on the expressway is extremely important. And if you look at Lincoln Yards, it is, kind of the hole in the donut of neighborhoods surrounded by Lakeview and Lincoln Park and Wicker Park and Bucktown. So a lot of access from a lot of different directions, but the train's important, proximity to O'Hare and everything that Suzette just talked about.
Yeah, and in order to fulfill that, is further investment in transit or the infrastructure required to bring that to light?
I mean, the train station, if you know that train station on Clybourne, I think it has 8 parking spaces and you got to play Frogger to get from the train station over to Lincoln Yards. So all of that is going to be handled with our multimodal train stop. We're going to have autonomous vehicles that take people to and from all over Lincoln Yards. We're adding 3 new bridges over the river. We're obviously building the Riverwalk from Webster down to North Avenue. It's going to be very pedestrian friendly. You can obviously have a car, but you're not going to need one. So all of the access is extremely critical and something we've been focused on.
And I think I'm most excited about being able to take a water taxi from Lincoln Yards into the Loop. I mean, how many companies can boast that their employees can take a water taxi and be right in the heart of the downtown area?
Nice way to travel.
Yeah, for sure. Andy, you mentioned groundbreaking in July, but what's currently going on at the site? Can you tell us what's happening there?
Yeah, I mean, this was an extremely contaminated site. And so it's taken the last few years to clean up the site, and is 100% clean. But we removed literally 70 different underground tanks. We removed, I forgot the stats, but 26,000 tons of contaminated soil. I mean, one of the as with a lot of the, as Chicago transitioned from an industrial economy to the new age, is the site needs to be cleaned up. And that's, that does a lot of wonderful things for the community, but it's cost a lot of money and taken a lot of years to get it to the point where it's clean and we're pad ready to break ground in July. But a lot of it has been cleaning up the site yet. It's taken a while.
And when you think about July groundbreaking, what does that start with?
That starts with, G1, the life science building. It starts with the office building. It starts with, approximately 800 apartments. Starts with our entertainment area, Riverwalk, and the open space. So all is happening at once. It's obviously going to take the better part of 3 years to get all of that done, but it's $1 billion of vertical, and we can't wait to get started.
That's exciting. Andy, you had mentioned some of your investor partners, Lone Star and JP Morgan. Talk about how your partners are kind of helping you achieve the vision for Lincoln Yards.
As I said, these developments are not for the faint of heart. They are capital intensive, and the duration is longer than a typical transaction. And so we're fortunate enough to have JP Morgan's core fund, which is the largest real estate fund in the US, as our partner. They're patient, and they've been with us every step of the way, as has Lone Star. So it just takes an enormous amount of money to take an old steel mill and get ready for a mixed use development. And you need a capital partner who believes in the vision, and they do, and supports your vision, and that's what they've been. So we're very lucky to have them. And then moving forward, they also are putting their shoulder behind life sciences. And that's also very capital intensive. So we're very fortunate to have our partners shoulder to shoulder with us on this deal.
Yeah, that's great. Let's go back to the current vision for Lincoln Yards. You had mentioned heavy opportunity for life sciences. If you were to look at your plans, can you kind of recast the different uses that you're currently visioning for the development?
I don't know if we're recasting. I would say that we are negotiating with an anchor office deal, and I think this is an office deal that there's still some reluctance, right or wrong, to go into a very dense loop during this pandemic. So I do think you're going to start to see companies who want a little more openness, maybe not to be in an 80-story building, who are looking for a new solution. I also think they're looking for a new building where they can have fresh air on every floor, where they can have the stairwells. There's only so much you can do with existing buildings. And so you're going to start to see some companies who say, listen, I need to create a better environment for my employees to come back to work. And I'm not sure I can accomplish that wherever they may be. And I think we're starting to see some of that. And I think we're going to benefit for some of that relocation.
Yeah. I think the other thing that we're learning from the potential tenants that we're talking to is that a lot of these companies also want space to be able to expand as they grow. And I think that's one of the unique things that Lincoln Yards will offer. A company may come in what most consider a relatively small footprint, but there's enough space for them to grow and expand into a larger footprint as the need arises.
Yeah, and I think the issues they're having in Cambridge and expanding in the Bay Area and San Diego, companies we're talking to say, listen, we're gonna put our flag in the ground, but we want to make sure that we can expand if the urban presence works. And I think having a big piece of land helps give them that path to expansion. I think that's really important to create that campus environment, particularly for life sciences.
On the office use, Andy, it's interesting to think about how potential corporate needs have changed, or office needs have changed post-pandemic, whether that's a more flexible work schedule, or whether that's a shortened commute, or whatever the case may be. How does that play into what you can offer to an office user at Lincoln Yards?
I mean, first off, I think there was chatter early on in the pandemic that no one was going to come back to the office, and that's just simply not true. I think we all realize that as effective as this is, Dan, doing a Zoom meeting like this, I don't think it replaces being in person. And so I think that everyone has reached that conclusion. All the studies have been done. And so I think there's actually going to be a boom in the office market. I think everyone put pencils down in March of 2020, and the activity that we're getting right now, I think there's going to be an enormous surge. And so I think, office is not dead. It just took a year break.
There's a lot to be said for face-to-face interaction, knowledge sharing, and knowledge transfer. And I agree with Andy. I think, in-person work took a break for a year, but I see it coming back as well. Certainly if you were to come to our office, It's almost full, exactly. But we're seeing the same in other parts of the country and even in some parts of the city. It'll take time to get fully back, and I think a lot of companies will, probably even maintain some level of a hybrid working environment, but in-office work is definitely not going away.
Yeah.
We certainly would agree, and we see many of our clients putting their plans in place to return to the office in some modified way, but clearly there's a desire to get their organizations back together. So we would agree with that. Let's just generally talk about the impact of the pandemic on organizations, on the economy, even on the city. Clearly, we saw some unacceptable disparities that were brought on in terms of opportunities and healthcare and wellness. How will Lincoln Yards really make the city a better place to live and work?
Sure, I'll take that. Dan, by training, I'm a public health person. And if there's one thing that I've learned in my public health career, it is that a person's economic stability and the social determinants of health really determine their health status and health outcomes. So I think the biggest impact that Lincoln Yards will have on the city and all of these disparities coming out of the pandemic is, the job creation that it's creating. Poor neighborhood infrastructure is also a social determinant of health that results in higher levels of healthcare disparities. So the fact that we are implementing 1,200 affordable housing units, I think will also make the city better, more vibrant, healthier, and will put the city in a better position. So I think it's multifactorial. It is economic, it is housing improvement in many cases. And I think it's also the ability of the work that we're doing with the Prism Institute to really support entrepreneurs that are from underrepresented minority groups, also women-owned businesses, creating opportunities that those entrepreneurs perhaps haven't had the opportunity to have available to them in the past. And so, I think one of the things that is clear about the work that we're doing, and quite frankly, is one of the reasons why I chose to come to Sterling Bay. We love Chicago. And we care about the city, and we want to see this city be great. So Lincoln Yards is our effort to make sure that Chicago continues to be the great global city that it has long become known as.
And I also think it could provide a template for the other 700 acres to give people an idea of the upside of what they could do with some of this industrial land and convert it to kind of the new age economy. And I think, as I say, it's not easy, but I think that the success we're going to have in Lincoln Yards, I hope, encourages other people to take part of that North Branch and also other parts of the city, and for them to do the same thing.
Great. Thank you for that. We've got time for one more question before we go to some of the questions that have been submitted, and I want to remind folks in the audience to submit the questions as instructed earlier, and don't hesitate. We've got this coming in already. So again, a bit reflective. You both are leaders in your business, leaders in the community. What are some of your biggest lessons learned as you think about the challenge of the past year, either personally as leaders or in your business? Suzette, you want to start?
You want to take that one?
Sure, I'll start. It's interesting that you asked this question, Dan, because I was actually just thinking about this the other day. And one of the lessons that I've learned is, as a society and as an economy, we are really only as strong as our most vulnerable. And so I've been particularly heartened by what I've seen with the pandemic, with the private business sector coming together with philanthropic organizations and really doing everything that it could to take care of our most vulnerable, whether it was providing food or helping to increase access to testing and vaccination. So I think that as we look at business in Chicago, and especially mega developments, which is what we're talking about today, I think the responsibility is on us to do as much as we can to contribute to the economy, of course, but also the well-being of our city's residents.
That's great.
That's pretty well said. Okay.
Yeah, you can follow that.
Yeah, I'm not going to follow that.
Well, clearly we all have adapted in our businesses. Maybe Andy, from the business perspective, it would be knowing that certainly in the year that we had, you launched some new parts of your business, whether it's Sterling Bay West or others, but how do you really think about that strategically coming out of 2020? I
mean, we always have a long-term view. It isn't the first downturn we've dealt with. It was different than other downturns, but I remember 08, 09, those are unbelievably challenging years. So this had its own unique set of challenges. But we kind of believed in what we're doing. We high conviction in different verticals that we have and the markets that we're going to. And we doubled down and leaned in. And, we're starting to see some green shoots. I think we're all super encouraged for what's going to happen, whether it's later this summer and fall when the world opens up and you can go to a Cubs game and I think it's going to be a really fun time. But we believe in what we do, as I said, with high conviction, and we leaned into the bad situation, and we're happy we did.
Yeah,
that's great. By the way, the White Sox will be fun to watch this year too.
Who?
Great, thank you for that. Let's go to some of the questions we've got that have come in. Andy, you did talk about groundbreaking, but one of the questions is, when after groundbreaking would you expect target occupancy?
It takes about 2 years to build an office building. McDonald's was built in 18 months. I don't think we want to do that again. Life sciences probably takes closer to 30 months. So I think if you think about it, we're going to move as fast as we can, but probably 2 to 2.5 years from when we break ground. I think you'll see apartments you can live in and restaurants you can eat in. You'll have lab spaces and office buildings. So that's generally the timeline.
Great. And thinking about that could be either office or G1 and the lab space. Do you find that the lab space has a longer development cycle because of the interior build out and the complexities of lab space, or similar to office?
It does. It definitely does. But I think the lessons we've learned from other markets outside Chicago is you just have to build it, right? You can't, a lot of these companies, when they get funding, they have to find space. And so they don't have the luxury of getting some VC funding and then tell them you're going to get back to them in 30 months. They're already gone. They're outside Chicago. They're in Cambridge or they're in San Diego. So part of the difficulty in getting G1 was like, listen, we're going spec. And they're going to come. And so we validated, we think, the market with 2430. And I think, that's the critical thing about this space is it's really triggered by when they get their funding and they don't have much time to find new lab space. So it's important that we have that product available.
And quite frankly, I think that's one of the reasons why Chicago has lagged behind in really bolstering life sciences, because the space that we have here is so limited.
Yeah.
And so from what we've seen in the market and all of the analyses that we've done, it makes perfect sense to go spec.
Yeah.
Great. Question from the audience. Can you speak to how the future entertainment district will support the overall landscape of the travel and tourism industry in Chicago?
Yeah, I mean, we think it's an important component. Retail is changing. Retail has obviously gone through a number of changes that were accelerated by the pandemic. You could buy almost everything online. The stores were closed, but so we think it's important to have a healthy mix of food and beverage, some experiential retail, as well as some entertainment, and that's an important part of the overall experience. Making sure that every day of the week is busy with different activities. That's something we're doing.
And what I would add to that is, as Andy mentioned earlier, we're building an ecosystem where people can live, work, play. I actually like to say live, work, learn, play, because there's a lot of learning that will happen at Lincoln Yards and in this ecosystem. But I think in terms of contributing to our current tourism activity, it will provide yet another space for people to be able to come and see. As young people travel to Chicago just to visit, but for all we know, they could be coming to also think about where they want to take up residence, you know, when they graduate from school. And so, again, our effort to put our city right up there at the top of the list of places where the young talent wants to come.
Great. Great, thank you for that. Another question from the audience. Will there be any goals for construction firms along the lines of MBE, WBE, VBE to be involved in the building of Lincoln Yards?
I mean, yeah, in addition to the 26 and 6, we've already made equity investments in construction companies as a way to help them take successful businesses that are small and obviously grow them. So we're looking at a number of different avenues beyond the simple percentages that the Chicago dictates, and actually making investments not only with our money but with our time. And I think that a lot of the, there's a rebar company we invested in that is now going to be doing a lot of a rebar and with the infrastructure in Lincoln Yards. So we're just thinking of unique ways outside of the guidelines that the Chicago sets forward that we can help, and that's something that is important what we're doing.
That's great. This has been a fantastic discussion, and there's more questions that continue to come in. So we could probably go on for another half hour, but in respect of everyone's calendar, I want to thank you, Andy and Suzette, for a really robust discussion. I learned a lot today, and I'm sure that our group did as well. It's been really a great opportunity to talk about the exciting things that are planned for Lincoln Yards. So I'd like to ask our audience to just join me in a virtual round of applause for our speakers today.
Thank you.
Really well done. So as we conclude our session today, as a board member of Executives Club, I'd like to remind everyone to stay tuned for more upcoming virtual programs. There's a great one planned for Wednesday, May 5th. At 3 p.m. by the Talent Development Forum. They are presenting a panel discussion on thriving in a hybrid world and optimizing your exit strategy from a workforce lockdown. That's going to be a good one for sure. Again, this is a wrap on our mega development series. I want to thank Meredith O'Connor, my colleague, for really initiating this and working with Megan and the Executives Club team. And again, thank you very much to Andy and Suzette for a great program today. We hope everyone has a terrific rest of their day. And we look forward to doing this live very soon. And it's not too far off in the future. So thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Dan.
We appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.